Hi everyone, I'm Scott Schneider. This is Stereo Niche. Hey, this week we're going to talk about how to add some modern components into our vintage gear to make it better. All right, so it's 2025 in year 3 of Stereo Niche. By the way, Stereo Niche. I periodically get some folks who want to give me a little bit of the grammar police, I guess, and tell me that it's not niche, it's niche. Well, I'm not going to cover this every time, but I do want to point it out occasionally that niche is actually quite a proper way of pronouncing the word and is actually the older pronunciation. Niche was around before niche, which started around 1961 and has gained popularity, but it is not the only correct way to say the word. So I've always said it as niche, and that's the way I'll continue saying it, but niche is perfectly fine. If you'd like to call it niche, you go right ahead. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. So for 2025, I've decided I'm going to start incorporating a little bit of new technology here and there into my vintage setups to see where I can make some improvements. So I get approached by a lot of companies. Most of them are non-audio related, but occasionally I'll get an audio related manufacturer of something reach out. And thus far, I've always said, no, I'm not interested. Until it comes to the point that I want to start incorporating some of those things into my vintage gear, I don't have a purpose in looking at it or reviewing it. But recently, a company reached out and actually has some products that I think might work well with our vintage setups. So I thought I would accept their offer, which was to send me one of their units. I don't make any commission off of anything, but give me a chance to try them out and see if I like them or not, and if they'll work well with our vintage gear. So I'm starting off with, it's a company called Fosse Audio, and Fosse is a Chinese company and they make their products in China. And the very first product I'm going to look at is what's called the Box X5. And that's a little preamp that they've come out with, a phono preamp that sells for a little over $100. I think it's $109. And that's, a pretty good price for a phono preamp. So I thought, well, let's give it a test and let's give it a run through and, see what it's all about. So for phono preamps, I did a review of one not too long ago, just as a discussion point of the benefits of adding an external phono preamp to certain gear. And in that video, I talked about it as in connection to my tube gear. I just like to use a little bit modern, more components, especially a phono preamp for certain things. And I think with tube gear, it makes sense. So I had done that video. So I still have everything set up. So I thought, well, why don't I just go ahead and take this unit and compare it to the unit that I had been using. So that's what I thought I would do this go round. Before we get there though, I thought, well, let me show you a little more up close what this little Fosse unit looks like, and then we'll come back at the end and I'll tell you my thoughts on how it compares to the other phono preamp. So as you can tell, it's a fairly small unit. It's not large at all. It doesn't take up a lot of footprint. It's very light. This thing could fit pretty much anywhere. It's a nice metal enclosure here. The enclosure, at least, it's not plastic. It doesn't feel inexpensive. You've got a nice little indicator here on the front to tell you that it's on. It's a power switch. You hold it on for a couple of seconds and that turns the unit on. All of the control connections and controls and configuration is on the back, of course. And I'm going to put up a little diagram here in a minute or so and show you what it looks like on the back. I'm going to show you a picture of it and then talk through the connectivity. But it's all here. You've got your gain settings here and your RCA connections in and out, and then your MCMM switch, depending on what kind of cartridge, and then a ground connection, and then a power input as well. So speaking of power, it has an external power source, of course. It has this transformer. It does have the connection to the device itself here, and a separate cord. It's not a wall wart, so it does have a separate AC cord in the back. So, if you happen to go into multiple outlets or something, it doesn't, the wall wart doesn't cover up, take up those valuable outlets. So it's a regular 2-pin connection. So, pretty well, it feels pretty good. It feels solid, feels well made. So really nothing I can say negative about this whatsoever as far as its physical size, the feel of it, and the quality of it. So let's move on to some other areas, like how do you connect this thing? All right, so let's take a look at the manual. It doesn't go into great depth here, but let's take a look and see what it did provide. I'm going to jump down to really the third section here. So it does have connectivity or functions for an MM or an MC cartridge. And if you're unfamiliar with that, an MM is a moving magnet and the MC is a moving coil. And they're built differently. So they take a slightly different configuration to work properly for each type of cartridge. So when you're going to use this unit, you want to find out what kind of cartridge do you have on your turntable. If it came with it, you may need to take it off and do a quick inspection, look up the specs on it. And then step 4 is what's called the gain knob, and you can set the gain settings here. And if you get on to step 5, it gives you a couple of recommendations on where to set them. What's different about this one that other phono preamps have is the ability to then select another selection for your input impedance. This other unit that I have, the other preamp that I use, you set the impedance based on your cartridge, and it gives you a little more finer tuned settings, I'll say, some more impedance options. But for that unit, you have to go inside, open the unit, and you have some little connectors you have to connect to do that. So it's a little more cumbersome on that particular unit. But most preamps, or I will say much more expensive preamps, do have additional impedance selector switches on them. For this unit, what you do select is the gain, and they give you a recommendation here for an MM cartridge at 47 K ohms here. You would use either 38 decibels or 48 decibels of gain. And then for MC cartridges with 100 ohms, you would then use either 56 decibels or 66. And there's no harm if you wanted to switch it into the other ones and give it a try. No harm in trying that, and perhaps you might like it on a different setting. But this is where you should start and test that out. The other things here are just the RCA output and the ground terminal. Those are pretty self-explanatory, as well as the power input. So the one thing that the manual does not go into that older manuals in the 70s and 80s, we always had a good connection diagram. How do you connect this thing? And if you're connecting a whole system, it was needed to understand, where do you connect things, what do you go in and out of, and it can get confusing for some people. So if it's not something that you're familiar with, I thought, I would put together a little bit of a connection diagram just to talk through that. So starting at the turntable has wires, RCA connections that come out, as well as a ground wire that comes out of the turntable. So that's your output, and then you would connect that to the input on the preamp. So it's fairly straightforward. Typically the output, red is right, and then white is going to be your left channel, and you connect those to the appropriately marked RCA inputs on the preamp side. And then you would take your ground wire from the turntable and connect it to the ground lug here on the back, which is just over the AC connection. Now, this is where I think it gets a little iffy for some folks. They only talk about connecting, or because it only gives you the ground lug, that you're going to connect the turntable to the preamp. But I would recommend getting yourself a wire, because it doesn't come with anything else. to connect the wire from that to your preamp or your receiver, whichever you're going to connect it to for your power source side of things, just to make sure that you don't have any issues with hum. There's no harm in doing that, and I think it would be a little more beneficial to go ahead and do it versus not. That will require you to find a wire and make it long enough, and then use that for a connection. You don't need a special wire; you just need a wire. That's all you need. So that's one thing that I think is kind of important. I do that on all of my preamps to make sure I'm going from the turntable to the external preamp to the receiver or other preamp if I'm using a component. So from there, from the output side of the preamp here, the X5, you then take the left and right outputs and go to the inputs on your receiver. Now I want to point out here, it isn't the phono inputs, because this preamp is amping up the signal from the turntable, and if you were to go into the receiver phono, you would have big problems. It's not expecting a much more powerful signal to come in, which we call line in. It was not expecting that. So you need to connect this to either an auxiliary input, or it can be your tape input. Any other line in level input is fine. So that's how we would connect it. Now I'm going to show you a diagram of what not to do, just in case you want to just confirm things here. But I'm only going to talk about the input side of the receiver or the preamp, the final preamp. So you don't want to go into the phono on your receiver. That's a no-no. That phono has a phono preamp behind it and is amping up that signal. So when you come out of the box here, the Fosse preamp, it's already amped up, right? So you don't need to amp it up yet again, because that could damage, your phono on your receiver side. All right, so I had this set up in the system for several days, and I actually did it across a couple of different systems, but most of the time I had it connected to my Fisher tube amp. And for a period of time, I put it on the other side of the room. That's where I have my speaker reference system over there, and put it through its paces against my Pioneer Elite preamp over there. On this side of the room, I had it head-to-head with my other external preamp. I have a couple of others, but this is the one I use mostly. It's a model from a company called Sutherland, and it's a PH3D model. And this model came out in the late aughts, around 2008 or so. And it is a battery-powered unit, actually. It runs off of, I think, 12 or 16 D batteries. And so it's a pretty hefty unit, but it's, fairly large in size, about the size of a regular component, but, of course, much thinner. This unit is a fairly high-end unit. It cost $3,000 MSRP back around 2008. So, not an inexpensive lower-end unit at all. Now, there are other preamps that can get much more expensive than that, but this one I bought used, some years ago, and certainly didn't pay that, but the MSRP for it. But the point is, I want to make sure that we understand this. I was going head-to-head against a much more expensive, much more higher-end unit to get an idea of how did this Fosse unit fare. So it's been playing all week, and I've gone back and forth with them, same tracks, just trying to get an idea, of the differences. Now, mind you, the Fosse is, retails at $109. Were there differences? Yes, I did detect differences. The Sutherland, I'll tell you, it's very smooth. It's a very, I'll say, silky. Doesn't mean that soft by any means. Where you need sharpness on cymbals and things like that, they're there, but it's not edgy in any sort of way. It's sort of, to me, it sort of has that silkiness that I expect from a higher end component. Now the Fosse fared very well. The Fosse, it did very well for a unit that is a fraction of the price of the Sutherland. So I did back and forth, and the nuances that I detected were that the Fosse is a little bit more, I'll say it's a bit sharp in a way. It has an edginess to it, just around the edges a little bit. Still very, very good. I can't say that it sounded anything like a little over $100 preamp whatsoever. It sounds very good. Compared to the Sutherland, though, there's just a little bit of edginess to it that I detected. In the same way you might think about certain things that might need a break-in period. It's sort of like that. It feels, just a little too tight, that it just needs time. Now, I'm not assuming that this will soften up over time, but it has that sort of feeling to it. And I don't think that's going to change, but I felt like it was a very good preamp. Everything about the sound I liked. Just when I had to do that head-to-head comparison, those were the nuances. Is it, 20-something times the improvement for the Sutherland? No, it's not. It's not that many X times improved. It's an incremental improvement. And that's what you find most of the time with higher end gear. You are almost, in I would say any decent gear, you're 98% of the way there. That last couple of percents, becomes exorbitantly expensive. And that's, I think, a similar comparison here. You've got a little bit better, headroom to go to make some improvements, but at what cost? And so I think that's where the Fosse is a hell of a bang for the buck. It gets you, very, very close to that ceiling, but at a fraction of the cost. So as far as a good phono preamp, I think it's a hell of a bargain. So if you're looking for one, a preamp, I don't think you could go wrong here. It's got a good solid build to it. It's got good functionality to it. And it's got a very nice sound. So don't think you can go wrong. I can't see anything. Now longevity, we'll see. They're brand new. Will there be issues with them over time? Who knows? Only time will tell us that. But at least it's not a unit that you're in for several $1,000s and then something goes wrong. It's a fairly low level of entry. I think that's it for this review. Appreciate you guys tuning in. You don't want to miss the next video. Hit subscribe. Want to get notified, hit that bell. As always, we'll see you next time.